What up, gang? Carolina Jackpot Time coming at you on Sunday afternoon. Today, we are going to talk about Power 4 conferences, specifically Darkhorse candidates to win each Power 4 conference. These are not the teams that are currently number 1 or number 2 in terms of the best odds to win these conferences, but I'm going to lay out for you some facts and some reasoning behind why I think these teams have a legitimate shot to win their respective conferences. Before we get into all that, if you're new around here, please consider staying true around here. Subscribe to this channel. I'm really trying hard to get the subscribers up on this channel before the start of college football season. Also, down in the description box below, there'll be a link to Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App. If you could give $1 or $2, if you really enjoy the content, I sure would appreciate it. You know what? It's hard to do college football content on YouTube and really make a go of it during the off season, so every little bit is appreciated. It's just a suggestion. You don't have to do it. I'm not a hobo begging for spare change in the subway. Just give it a little thought. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Big Ten is the first one up today, and over on FanDuel, this is where the odds that I'm using today will be coming from. Ohio State is number 1 at plus 165, Oregon at plus 210 to win the Big Ten. But I want to specifically look at Penn State. They're at plus 550 odds right now to win. And I know, James Franklin has never made a playoff. He's never gotten over the hump, couldn't beat Ohio State and Michigan. Well, guess what? This year, he doesn't have to beat both Ohio State and Michigan. Schedules are different. And we're going to talk about that, too, for each one of these teams, as a matter of fact. Nick Singleton, the running back who was a freshman sensation back in 2022, kind of had a little bit of a sophomore slump last year, wasn't necessarily hurt, just didn't perform as well. He was, production-wise, down 300 yards from his 2022 total, and that was with more carries. He did factor in the passing game much more in 2023, so if they could put this stuff together, it would really help put this team closer to where they need to be. Drew Allar, last year, first full season as a starter, 2,681 yards, 25 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions. So he's really accurate, and he has added Julian Fleming, a former 5-star recruit. He's a transfer from Ohio State. This guy is from Pennsylvania. He actually played for Southern Columbia Area High School. It's in a little town called Catawissa, Pennsylvania. And I don't know if you know anything about Southern Columbia Area High School, but they won like 15 Pennsylvania single-A state championships in a row. I mean, that it's true. I mean, their amount of success is just ungodly. Go Google Southern Columbia Area High School and watch some of the videos. There's actually a long documentary on them that I enjoyed, and I drew my attention to them a few years ago when we were on vacation. There's a amusement park out there, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and this school was not far from it, and I'm like, there's a football stadium in a cornfield. And then later on, a couple months later, in August, I noticed that they were playing Hammond High School, which is in Columbia here in South Carolina, and they just beat them like 60-0, and that was the team that had Jordan Birch, who ended up coming to South Carolina and eventually going to Oregon. So really good program that Julian Fleming came from. 2022 was his best year at Ohio State. 34 receptions, 533 yards with 6 touchdowns. He's just kind of lost in the shuffle up there. Ohio State always has just a seemingly rotating door of really high shelf wide receiver talent. He was the number 1 player in terms of the 2020 class as far as the ESPN rankings go. So this guy, if given the chance, I think he'll really shine there. They return a lot of starters on defense. They bring in A.J. Harris, who was a highly rated transfer kid from Georgia that plays defensive back. Abdul Carter, one of their defensive end, was a first-team All-Big Ten guy. Now, he's got some actual assault charges against him. He beat up a tow truck driver, allegedly, back in like March, April. So I'll have to see how that pans out. I mean, the guy wasn't hurt, or hurt seriously. I seriously don't think that he will probably miss, probably get suspended a game or something. But, look for that they're going to be a factor there. I think Penn State definitely has what it takes to win the Big Ten. They have a very manageable schedule. There is a 3-game stretch kind of in the middle of the season where they're at USC, which, I think they're going to have a rough introduction into the Big Ten, to be quite honest with you. They're at Wisconsin, which is trying to build their program back up. They should be a little bit better this year, but still, they're not on the level of a Penn State or an Oregon or an Ohio State. And then you're playing Ohio State, and that's a home game. And I expect that'll be the whiteout game for Penn State. So look for Penn State to possibly be a dark horse candidate to win the Big Ten. Over in the new look Big 12, Kansas State and Utah both share plus 350 odds to win the conference. But I specifically want to talk about the Kansas Jayhawks, who are sitting here at plus 650 odds. They're going to actually play most of their home games in Arrowhead Stadium, the home of the Chiefs this year. Some of their games, their non-conference ones, they're going to play in a facility called the Children's Mercy Park, which is an actual an MLS soccer stadium. Both of these are in the Kansas City area. They're about 100 miles from campus. They're renovating the David Booth Memorial Kansas Stadium over the course of the year. Right now, it looks like this. Well, it actually looked like this at the end of last season. And when they're done with all these renovations, it's going to look like this. Yeah, so a lot of difference there. Really, really nice project they got going on there at Kansas, and they deserve it. The fans deserve it, and the team deserves it. They have done so much better the past few years than what they were previously. Now, they were 6-7 back in 2022. If you'll remember, that team started out 5-0, and then last year they finished 9-4. So everything is on the uptick for Kansas football there. Powerhouse? No. But they've got the pieces in place to become a really, really good team and a player. I want to talk about Jalen Daniels, the quarterback. This guy, he's often injured, but had those injuries not occurred, this guy would be probably the top quarterback in the Big 12 coming into this season. His best season was 2024. Threw for 2,014 yards, 18 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, completed about 66% of his passes. But he also rushed for 417 yards and 7 touchdowns. Last year, he actually had a 75% completion rate going on when he was injured. 5 touchdowns and 1 interception. Like I said, he is an electric kid, and if he can stay healthy, this team is going to be very, very dangerous. There is no more Jason Bean. Jason Bean is the kind of light-skinned kid with the little afro out the back of there. He was kind of a fan favorite there, I think, at Kansas, but he's gone, and they'll have to find another option in terms of a backup if Jalen Daniels goes down, which it's likely to happen, right? Because he's went down a lot. Running back Devin Neal is second team all Big 12 last year. Probably would have been the first team all Big 12 running back if Ollie Gordon hadn't been there at Oklahoma State. In 3 years, he's rushed for about 3,000 yards. Last year was his best, 1,280 yards, 16 touchdowns. He also had 217 yards receiving. The defense is a little bit more of a question mark there. They do have a Big 12 corner in Kobe Bryant, not spelled like the more famous version of Kobe Bryant. But this is a team that if they can put all that together, I think they can be really, really good. It's going to hinge a lot on Jalen Daniels staying healthy. They've got a few transfers that have come on the lines of scrimmage. Those guys will have to adapt to a Power 4 level of competition. Most of them came from lower level schools, but they've got the right coach to develop them there in Lance Leopold. He was the number 12 ranked head coach in CBS Sports Composite this year, and would be probably even higher ranked were he at a better school. And quite frankly, I mean, he's not able to get the talent at Kansas that he would be able to get at some schools. But he's 163-60 in terms of as a head coach. He's taken this team from 2-10 to 6-7 to 9-4. Can they take that next step? Can they win the Big 12? I think it's a possibility that they could. It's not silly talk to think that this team could win that conference, especially with Texas leaving, with Oklahoma leaving. Your two toughest foes are now out of the way. Look for Kansas to possibly make some noise in 2024 over in the Big 12. Getting a little bit closer to home, I'm going to talk ACC. The two betting favorites there are Florida State at plus 270 and Clemson at plus 340. But hear me out, and let's talk for a minute about Dave Doeren and the NC State Wolfpack at plus 600 odds. Now, looking at their schedule in 2024, they open up conference play at Clemson. That's going to be their toughest game. State has not won at Clemson since 2002. The schedule is basically downhill from there, guys. They've got some manageable home games. They do play at UNC in the last game of the year, but look, I mean, we know what UNC does traditionally as the season goes on. They just get worse and worse and worse. So, to me, that slate sets up very nicely for NC State. Dave Doeren, 81-58 at North Carolina State, 104-62 overall. I think this is one of the guys that really just doesn't get credit for being a really, really good head coach in a program that, look, it's just somewhere, it's kind of stuck in the muddy middle. No, it's not tremendously difficult to recruit to NC State, but no, you're also going to have a hard time getting that top shelf talent. Now, North Carolina, for a state the size that it is, really doesn't produce a ton of high-level high school players. But there's a couple of them, and they play on this team. We're going to talk about them here in a minute. But first, I want to talk quarterback, Grayson McCall, guy transferring in from Coastal Carolina. Has thrown for almost 10,000 yards in his career and 87 touchdowns. Now, 2020 was actually his best season in terms of statistically, where he actually rushed for 569 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's kind of dipped a little bit each year. He was also hurt in 2023. That was his worst statistical year, but he still threw for almost 1,900 yards. He's a solid quarterback who can do a lot of things pretty well. I mean, he doesn't do anything great, but he's also going to get coached up this year under veteran OC Robert Anae. He's made a ton of stops at different places around the country over the years, and I think that Anae may be able to help McCall, if he's healthy, elevate his game to the next level. In terms of the backfield, you're bringing in Jordan Waters, a transfer from Duke, 819 yards and 12 touchdowns last year for the Blue Devils. He transferred out after Mike Elko ends up going to Texas A&M. He'll probably be your starter, but look out for a young man named Hollywood Smothers, who's transferred in from Oklahoma. Now, he's going to be a freshman. This kid was a 4-star out of the Charlotte area and ended up at Oklahoma, but he's transferred back to North Carolina to play alongside a young man named Casey Concepcion, who he played with in high school. This guy was the 2023 ACC Rookie of the Year, 71 catches for 839 yards and 10 touchdowns. But get this, he also rushed 41 times for 320 yards. Just a do-it-all utility-type receiver, very fast, very athletic, really, really good player. And if he has another season like that this year, NC State's going to have to pay him a boatload to keep this guy around. I'm just telling you. They do have several transfers coming in at wide receiver, and they're also bringing in Jonathan Paylor as a true freshman, a kid that it was a battle between NC State and South Carolina late last summer to get his services, and he ended up going to NC State. It was we thought he was a lock to come to the Gamecocks. I'm telling you what, that one really burns me up. But there's nothing you can do about it now. He's there. Maybe he'll hit the portal and come back to South Carolina one day. Never know. Defensively, you did lose all ACC player Peyton Wilson, who got picked up by the Steelers. Aiden White, kid is a third-team ACC cornerback, is back there. But there's a lot of youth and transfers on the defense at NC State, and that's going to be a work in progress. That may be what holds this team back just a bit and renders them unable to win this conference. But skill position-wise, I mean, I think they are in really, really good shape, especially with McCall. Being coached up by this Robert Anai fella, I really think this guy could be dangerous. I think he's a fifth-year player, but I think there's quite a bit of gas left in the tank. And since 2020, NC State's been 8-4, 9-3, 8-5, and 9-4. Can they take that next step? Let me know what you think. Is below NC State, and just in terms of the odds in the ACC of winning the conference championship, I thought it was kind of interesting. You actually have Louisville right above NC State, like plus 500, but Virginia Tech's at plus 1,400. I think that's everybody's darling to be like maybe a dark horse contender, maybe a dark horse to win like 10 games. People are talking about they may be undefeated when Clemson comes in Blacksburg. I think they may still be a year away. They've got a good quarterback, but skill talent-wise, I'm not so sure about them. They're at plus 1,400, but actually SMU, newcomer to the conference, is at plus 1,800. And I thought about SMU, and I actually thought about putting them in this spot, but they just, to me, really don't have the depth, and I don't think that they have what it takes defensively to really compete for a conference championship. So that's what we got going on there. But NC State, North Carolina is the next one in line. This is behind SMU now, behind SMU. North Carolina is at plus 4,500 odds, which is kind of nuts to me. Stanford is actually the lowest at plus 50,000 odds. Could you imagine that? If you just threw down a $100 bet before the season started and Stanford actually ended up winning that conference, you'd win $50,000. Same thing would happen with Vanderbilt. Which one would be least likely, Vanderbilt to win the SEC or Stanford to win the ACC? I got to think it would be Vanderbilt to win the SEC, but that's just me. All right, the one that everybody's been waiting for, the SEC. And I had a couple that I thought about here. Tennessee at plus 1,100 odds right now. Kind of looked enticing to me for a second, but then I kind of looked, they bring in sophomore quarterback Nico Iamaleava. I think I'm saying it right. They're bringing him back. He's really highly touted. I think he's really going to do some good things there. They're talking he could be in New York. I think that might be a little bit far-fetched. But aside from him, skill talent-wise, I'm just not quite sure that they are as loaded as this team that I'm fixing to talk about here. At plus 1,500 odds, you've got the Missouri Tigers. This is going to be a really, really good team in 2024. And you want to talk about stacked in terms of wide receiver talent? They are. You bring back Theo Weiss, a guy who transferred in from Oklahoma last year. You got Mookie Cooper, a kid who's been there for a couple of years, that transferred in originally from Ohio State. And then you bring in homegrown talent, Luther Burden. Now, this guy is probably the best one of the bunch. He'll be playing on Sundays for sure. Only had 1,200 yards last year to go along with 9 touchdowns. I mean, there's weapons all over the place. Quarterback Brady Cook, comes back again. He's, as far as improvement, this guy was the definition of that in 2023. He improved his passer rating from 2024 by 20, or by 2023, from 2023 by 24 points. That is excellent. Completed 66% of his passes, 3,317 yards, 21 touchdowns, along with 6 interceptions. And he went for just like an ungodly amount of quarters without throwing an interception from the time he threw his last one in 2022 till the time he threw his first one against LSU in 2023. They also bring in Marcus Carroll. This young man has been at Georgia State for the past few years at the running back positions. He's 5'10", about 210 pounds. He's very similar in size to Cody Schrader, the guy who got picked up by the 49ers, that many people said was the heart and soul of the team last year, and in many ways he was. But I think a lot of people are kind of disrespecting Missouri because he's not there anymore, and that they're not going to be able to, they might not be able to replace his heart and soul, but they could replace his production with this guy. Carroll went for 1,350 yards last year and 13 touchdowns. He can also catch, too. 23 touchdowns, 234 yards. And you talk about like a strong bowling ball type player. This guy's it. Going to be very difficult to tackle. And I think that he is one of the guys out of the transfer portal that people aren't even talking about at all. All they're talking about is they lost Cody Schrader. They're not talking about who they're bringing in. Now, he's coming from a Group of 5 school. Is he going to be able to replicate those numbers at an SEC school? I don't know. It remains to be seen, but you got to think he's playing behind an SEC offensive line now, right? He's not going to be playing behind a Sun Belt offensive line. I think Marcus Carroll is really one that's under the radar, somebody you need to keep a watch out for. Tight end Brett Norfleet is also a very talented player. He's going to be a sophomore this year, 200 yards catching last year, 3 touchdowns. He's only 6'7". You know, it's not like he's a little target running around out there. Missouri is loaded offensively. Offensive line-wise, they've got to plug some holes there. That may be what holds them back a little bit. But defensively, you're returning Johnny Walker, a guy who came out of nowhere at defensive end in 2023, registered 43 tackles and 5 sacks. I think about 4 of them came against the Gamecocks. Now, they're also bringing in 5-star Williams Nwaneri. This guy was just kind of wanted by everybody. But it kind of came down to a little battle there between Mizzou and Oklahoma. He ended up choosing Mizzou, and that kind of put the Oklahoma people in a state of just, I don't know, just utter panic. They were really pissed off. They had some wars over on Twitter. It was quite entertaining to read about. Joseph Charleston is a player in the defensive backfield. They actually have 2 Clemson transfers back there. Charleston is one of those. And how he's still playing, I don't know. I mean, this guy's been around since, I think he was on the Natty team, the last one Clemson had there. But in 2 years in Columbia, 113 tackles, he's really flourished since he came to Missouri. He was just a piece of the puzzle at Clemson. He's a big piece of the puzzle at Mizzou. Toriano Pride is a player that had 36 tackles in 2 seasons at Clemson. Just wanted to come back somewhere that was closer to home, I think. He's from the St. Louis area and wanted to come somewhere he was going to make a difference. He was just really, really buried down on a depth chart at Clemson behind a bunch of really good defensive players. So if they can replace some of the other pieces that they lost in that defensive backfield, that defense is going to be good. Now, they did lose their defensive coordinator, Coach Baker, who went to LSU, kind of took the bag there from Brian Kelly. But I think that Drinkowitz is a coach who almost seems like he embraces adversity a little bit, like he embraces the challenge, and I think they're going to be really, really good this year. Another loss that we're not talking about is the thicker kicker. You know who that is, Harrison Mevis. Guy seemed like he was there for 10 years. He's gone, ended up signing one of those undrafted free agent type deals with the Carolina Panthers. We'll see if he actually makes the team. He had a couple of really good seasons early on. I mean, it was almost like it was automatic and he would not miss. The past couple of seasons, he hadn't been quite as accurate, but he did hit that big 61-yard field goal at the end of that Kansas State game to win that game for him. And that was the win right there that kind of propelled Mizzou to that next level and kind of was a springboard for them for that success they had in 2023. So Harrison Mevis was a huge part of that. Their schedule it's very favorable. There's no Texas on the schedule, no UGA. By the way, those are the two betting favorites to win the SEC. There is a challenging trip to Alabama. They do face Texas A&M and Auburn, but, they play South Carolina and Vanderbilt. They're going to be favored in those games. Non-conference schedule is, it's basically non-existent, which they don't really play a tough non-conference schedule most years. Last year, it kind of benefited them a little bit. They didn't really show their hand in their first couple of games, and we just thought they were going to be average, but, they were anything but average. In order to win the SEC, though, I think that Mizzou absolutely, they need to win out. I was looking at it and saying, well, they could potentially lose that game to Alabama and still make the conference championship game, win it. I'm not so sure. Because I think that somebody's going to go undefeated. It's likely Texas or Georgia. Somebody's going to go undefeated. You've got Ole Miss there also in the mix that might end up being a one-loss team. So if Mizzou were to lose one game, then there's going to be kind of like a tiebreaker of sorts there, and I guess that would be based on what teams that you lost to and who beat them and what their record was. So they really need to win out, and I think they have the favorable. I think if they can win at Alabama, I think they could potentially win their other 11 games and go undefeated and get to the SEC championship game. And, with the right matchup on the right day, I think they could end up winning the thing. It's not that far-fetched. All right, guys, let me know down in the comments section below your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. I sure did enjoy making it for you guys. I will see you all later. Appreciate it. Peace, and I am out of here.